good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone who's watching us right now. I'm very happy to welcome Jesslyn and Jessica from Facebook Open Source. Do you want to just quickly maybe introduce yourselves, Jesslyn and Jessica? Shall we start with you, Jesslyn?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jesslyn. I'm a developer advocate at Facebook. And before this, I was working on kind of like the intersection of developer communities and AR/VR input. So really excited to be doing this kind of work at Facebook.
Nice. Good to meet you all. My name is Jessica. So I joined Facebook actually on the documentation engineering team with our PyTorch team, and now I'm working on our developer advocacy team focused on our AI ML products.
Great. So welcome to this portion of the conference, and happy Women's Day to everyone who's watching us right now. So maybe we can start with some questions about open source. So what is open source? How do you define it? I'm sure a lot of people know about it, but let's get your point of view. So what you think open source is?
Do you want to take it?
Sure. Okay, I'll take it. I see. Open source. Yeah, so I think a lot of people in the conference have probably heard of it, or maybe work in products that are open source or use open source products. But for those who don't know, open source, I think as it relates to code, means that the software that you're using, the code is all open, so open to the public. So meaning easy to open to, freely to view, to distribute, to modify. And so then that means it opens up the code for collaboration, but in a sense, it actually builds in a lot of security and transparency for those who are using it. And I think one thing that's actually cool to note is that actually a lot of our modern world is built upon open source products. So even things such as the stream that we're able to see, the information passing through a lot of the products that we are using are based on open source. So things like Apache Web Service, or even the data distribution centers. There's blueprints that are open source and open to the public. So then, in a sense, we get to, as a community, continue to build off of each other's work. So that's at the base open source.
Yeah, Jesslyn, do you want to add to that?
I feel like Jessica kind of covered a lot of it. What's really exciting about open source to me is that I feel like it encourages a lot of innovation and collaboration between people literally all over the world. And that's just, I feel like that's kind of like how the future should get built.
Yeah, because it's obviously important to get that diverse input from a lot of people, because that means that you're shaping this product or platform very well, and you're considering a lot of things that like one homogeneous group probably will be thinking about. So how does open source relate to Facebook?
Do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can start. When I think about open source at Facebook, I think a lot about Facebook's mission, which is to connect people all over the world. It's like giving power, and I think a lot about like giving power to people to build communities to bring the world closer together. So Facebook is actually built on a lot of open source technologies. Like the actual Facebook platform itself is built on a lot of open source. And what's really cool about, like one of the reasons why it's really exciting to me that Facebook is invested in open source is that Facebook has such a huge reach all over the world. Like literally, like when a lot of people think of Facebook, they think of the product company, but there are people all over the world using Facebook products. And it's just kind of cool to be able to have that kind of distribution network and that level of like resource, thinking about open source and thinking about democratizing technology.
So which particular part of Facebook or product of Facebook is actually built on open source? Is it the usual consumer Facebook that we all use, or is it more the business product, which I believe you call, is it Workplace, if I'm not mistaken? So are they both built on open source, or?
I think go ahead. I was just going to say that at many levels, if we look at it, so even from things such as the fundamentals of, say, the build system. So we have an open source buck build, so that we actually use internally, because our product is so large that some of the existing tooling just didn't work. So then we also took some open source products, modified it, and continued to improve upon it. So things such as from that level to even the mobile infrastructure that we're looking at. So if you're looking at, say, the Facebook marketplace app, so there's a product that's relatively well known in the web and mobile space. So React Native. So it's a JavaScript-based framework. So you can build iOS and Android applications all just in JavaScript. So that is entirely built in our React Native, which is an open source library. So if you actually go to our website, I would actually highly encourage folks who, if we are able to share links after, that we have a whole portfolio of products that we've used internally and tested it, and then have put out into the world. So yeah, it's a whole spectrum.
That's great. Anything to add to that?
I just think it's
okay.
Jessica brought up React Native, and it just makes me think a lot about how it's like you could literally be anyone, and like Facebook is built on top of React Native, and you could literally be anyone and use this open source technology. It's available on our open source website. It's like free to anyone, and build a website, a professional looking website like Facebook, or like any of the Facebook products. It's like that technology that we use to build Facebook is open to you, and I just think that's really cool.
Yeah, and obviously React Native is is very popular. A lot of developers are using it. I think there's a lot of demand for developers who know React and React Native, which is great. Okay, right. So why is Facebook a good place to be a woman in technology? Do you think? It seems that there are from my interactions with your team, there's a lot of women in your team. So is there actually a guy in your team even? Because so far, I think I've only been speaking to women, at least 4 of you anyway. So yeah. So why do you think Facebook is a good place to be a woman in tech?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think actually with us joining the team, we hit the 50% half women, half men on our team.
Okay, so there are many.
Yes, there are actually guys on the team. But I think for me personally, I think the culture coming into Facebook has been really opening and very transparent, from the way that leadership handles situation like external discussions to individual projects and how we're building them, and just issues that if we run into them, how we're going to improve on them. I think like with anything, it's about the people that are working on the project. And from the beginning, I've always felt that everyone that we're working with is open to, even if we're getting into a debate, it's always about the topic at hand. It's not about who we are individually. Like we might have disagreements, but we're always about how do we improve the work environment that we're working in, as well as just globally. Yeah, so what I was trying to say is that even from the support that I found in my managers and from like growing in career growth, there's just been a lot of encouragement and just holistic understanding of how we work as a team and individually.
I feel like for me personally, so I used to work at a startup before I worked at Facebook, and there were quite a number of women there. But one thing that I really appreciate about, and it was a really good community, but one thing that I really appreciate about working at Facebook at such a large company, not just a large company, but like Facebook specifically, is that like not only are they committed to connecting people who use their products, but there are also a lot of like internal Facebook groups to connect with people who share similar identities to you. So obviously like, there's a huge like women at Facebook group within Facebook for Facebook employees. But through the internal groups, I've also been able to find a lot of people who are like Indonesian like me, or maybe grew up in the same hometown, or have similar interests. And that's been really special to be able to find a lot of people and just like talk about things that people who don't share this identity might not necessarily talk about.
Great. Okay, so what are some of the things that you need to consider when open sourcing?
Yeah, open sourcing I think it's quite a spectrum, right? So, sorry, I just jumped into this one. I think maybe my thoughts on this are, yeah, like, again, open sourcing is quite a spectrum. So you can have an individual contributor who would maybe build out a project and they want to open source it, to a large company who has put together a project and they're considering their open sourcing. So I think at these levels, the kind of costs to consider, whether that's the attention costs, whether that's the maintenance costs. So things like when people are looking for open source products to use, they want to see what is how lively is the community? Is there continuous maintenance on it? And then am I able to contribute and hear back from the builders? So these are things that, at different levels. So whether that's the team figuring out, do we have people on the team to continue looking at the issues coming in, the PRs coming in, and to review those to the individual, like what are the available resources that we can allocate to continue maintaining this product, and then moving forward to, like, are there partnerships that we want to continue building on it, and what those partnerships look like. So kind of having that in mind when you're open sourcing. Sometimes people just think you open source and put it out into the world. That is an option, but if you want it to continue growing and being a continuously used and growing product, you have to really invest those thoughts into it.
I feel like one thing that just like plus wanting everything Jessica said, but one thing that also really speaks to me when I look at open source projects is the quality of the community. And that's not necessarily to say like, oh, how many people are using it. I'm like, that's like one metric, but another thing that's really special to me is when it's obvious that these are a group of people who may not have anything in common besides the fact that they care about this project and the fact that they're going out of their way to support and help each other. So it's like someone might just come in and be like, hey, I have a question. I don't know how this works. Can someone review my PR? And seeing that other people who just happen to be within this community are willing to be like, yeah, I don't know you. And like, I don't technically owe you anything, but like, this is something that I care about. And together, we're going to work together to make this thing good and improve on this. One of my favorite, I actually just recently learned this, but someone told me that for most of the major PyTorch releases, there are Chinese language documentation, and that's completely community source, which I thought was really cool. That's like people out there like care enough about this random project that they went out of their way to like do the entire documentation in another language. I just think that's really special.
Yeah, I actually am aware of one project where someone did that. I believe it's RxJS, and someone from Spain did like Spanish documentation, and obviously that that is very helpful to a lot of like, Spanish speaking people. So yeah, so I get what you mean by that.
I kind of love how I'm thinking a little bit of Hacktoberfest. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's like yeah. So if you're listening and you're not familiar with it, basically in the month of October, there's like this huge effort for people to contribute to open source. And one of the ways that I've seen people contribute to open source, which I never really thought about before, is through language documentation. I think like the very first time I heard of Hacktoberfest, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, like I'm new to coding. I like don't really know how I can contribute in a meaningful way. It's like, what can I do that other smarter coders out there haven't already done? It's like, who am I to do anything? But like, I don't know, it's like I'm Indonesian. So it's like, oh, it's like one thing that I can do is create language documentation for Indonesian for an open source project that I care about. And it's like trivial for me, but it's like something that the open source maintainers might not be able to do, or it might cost them a lot of effort. And by doing that, I kind of make this more accessible to people who are like me. And it's like, that's just so cool. It's like, you can do something that's like trivial to you, but it's like, it can help so many people around the world.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Hacktoberfest. I actually like their T-shirts, but
nice.
that's like a double-edged sword sometimes, because it's great because we're encouraging a lot of people to contribute, to learn how to contribute, even like, yeah, because some people don't have any idea how to do that. But obviously that particular weekend or week, a lot of the maintainers are actually challenged because they're getting so many PRs.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I know. And I think the company, I believe it's DigitalOcean, right, who runs it. I think they're rethinking that, so it's good. Yeah, they're recognizing that it's giving a lot of maintainers a lot of work as well. And as we know, a lot of these maintainers are doing this voluntarily on top of their regular jobs. So so yeah, so it's a good thing that people are rethinking that it's obviously a good, a good thing, but yeah, there needs to be a bit of a balance there. But anyway, all right. So what are the upcoming projects that you want to highlight?
I can start.
Sure, go ahead.
This is
Any
less of a
interesting
project and
projects?
more. This is less of a project and more of just like an effort that I'm excited about. We're thinking a lot about. I mean, like we have our current like Facebook open source site, and we're starting to think a little bit about like how we can have this serve the community a little bit more. So I'm excited. There's work in progress that I can't really talk about right now, but if people have thoughts about like ways, it's like, hey, I would really love to see this on a Facebook open source site. I would really love to hear ideas. I don't know if you can link my Twitter, but yeah, that's the best way to get in touch.
We'll definitely add all our Twitter handles, to this. I think right now we were only showing the name, so we can definitely add the Twitter handles. I was actually going to ask you at the end as well to mention it.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other things?
Jessica has a few projects, like specific projects that she's excited about.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, these are, I think, ones that we've probably heard of before, but these are definitely ones that I find very exciting as well. So most of you probably have heard of Facebook's collaboration in Diem, which is the digital currency that we're working on. And so then also in adjunction to that is the Novi wallet. So be able to store the digital currency. So be able to see, I'm personally very excited about just the financial, the pivot in the financial world, and again, bringing that openness and openness to the community. So I think it's a very exciting time to be able to like almost build a new, be able to at the beginning of like building a new currency. So be able to watch that. And then another project that one of our team members had spearheaded that has gotten a lot of traction. And I think it sounds very straightforward, but it does so much. It's called Docusaurus. So it's be able to easily maintain your open source documentation. So for folks who maybe have put out a project and they want to be able to have a website that looks really put together, that has documentation and tutorials, and then maybe some other content all packaged together, and be able to easily spin that up. That usually takes several steps, but this is a really easy out of the box tool. And we even found out that NASA has been using it. So you'll be amongst good company. Adjacent to that, I think is just our React family, a React family of products. So whether that's React Native, and then just adjacent projects that, like I was talking about before, where we were using it internally, have put it out. So things like Recoil, and then other like Flipper. So other adjacent projects. We can I'd say just taking a look at the open source website, and then lastly, definitely PyTorch, definitely close to my heart. Just the ecosystem itself is so large. We think of PyTorch as just kind of an umbrella project, but there's so many adjacent projects to it. So I definitely suggest going to pytorch.com, and then there's a tab that says, I think it's called Ecosystem, and you can go look down there. You can see all the models that folks in the community have contributed as well. So models meaning like neural networks that they've trained and then put up. So you can be able to go download those and play with those. So highly recommend taking a look at those for folks who are interested in those spaces.
I like that you brought up PyTorch. It made me think a little bit about my first experience to machine learning, which was at a hackathon. Actually, I was with a bunch of friends, and we were like, okay, we want to do a machine learning thing, and we went on the PyTorch website, and it's like there's a 1 hour video, I think, and by the end of it, it's kind of like, cool. I've never implemented a machine learning thing before, but it's like within 1 hour, it's like that is a thing that I can now do. I'm now a machine learning person. And just like the fact that I was like able to do that was really cool. And it just reminded me a little bit about, I guess this is like a project that I'm also excited about, but is like less technically focused. But Facebook open source recently partnered with Major League Hacking and GitHub to launch a remote summer 2020 fellowship program. So this was, I guess, like several months ago. But it's basically a year-long fellowship program that goes in towards 2021, and it helps provide Black developer scholarships to participate in the fall 2020 fellowship. So what we ended up seeing was like there were 150 fellows from over 20 countries and 15 different time zones, and 25% of them were women, which is pretty cool. And there were over 300 PRs opened. 50% of them were for Facebook projects, and about 40% of the PRs ended up being merged, and a number of the PRs actually landed in production. And I feel like that just really speaks to just like the value of this for me, or why this is special for me. It's just like literally anyone around the world can just submit things, and that could end up in Facebook code that like people all over the world can use.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah. Obviously, that would make someone who submitted that PR very happy. It's being used by billions, basically, of people. That's good.
You can point to that when you're applying for jobs. So.
Anything else? Any other new things coming up, or is it your?
Ooh. We're also working on a video series called Explain Like I'm 5. So if you go on our Facebook open source YouTube channel, there are a bunch of videos there, but basically it's kind of like, there's like a subreddit that's like Explain Like I'm 5. And what I really love about it is that people ask questions, and it's like things that sound obvious, but it's just like, hey, can you explain it to me in like a very straightforward way, as if you're talking to like a very naive user. And basically our Explain Like I'm 5 Eli 5 series introduces a bunch of Facebook open source projects, and it kind of walks you through it in 60 seconds, so you can kind of like go through it and figure out like, hey, is this like a project that I want to commit more time to? Is this something that I'm interested in?
That's good. Is that like a regular series, or?
Yeah, I think that there are there's, oh gosh, I don't have an exact number, but there are a bunch of videos out there on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think there's at least a dozen now.
So people should definitely check that out. Oh, you mentioned numbers. So how, like, let's talk about numbers in terms of like FB, open source, I don't know, projects, repos, whatever. Who wants to talk about that? Jessica, maybe?
Sure. Okay, so most of our projects and for our open source projects live on GitHub, which is no surprise. And so I think we have about like 1.3 million followers as of 2020. And then last year we actually released we added almost 200 plus repos new projects to our repos. So that means I think in total now we have about 700 projects. And then last year as well, we had about almost 130-ish thousand commits, total commits, and 15% of that being actually purely from the external community. So that was a lot of commits for our internal team to look at. We actually have a year in review that our teammate Raj had put out. So I don't know if we can share links later, but highly recommend looking up 2020 year in review Facebook open source, and you can see a whole breakdown of all the key metrics and all the things that all the collaborations that we've done throughout the past year. So looking forward to more.
What would you say to someone who doesn't have any idea, how to get involved with open source and all that? Where should they start? I know like the hackathon is one of them, Hacktoberfest is one of them, but any other things that they could be doing, for example?
The way I typically think about it, or encourage people to think about it, is like, think about a problem space that you care about. Maybe that could be like something in your community, or just like a cause that you really care about. And then think about ways in which you can make an impact for that. And then start looking for open source projects, like work backwards from that to figure out like what is out there to implement. I kind of phrase it that way because I feel like the times when I've most enjoyed working on project, it was because like I understood the why I'm doing this. And then it's like the how and the what specifically that I'm using kind of came after. And I feel like that's typically been more meaningful to me than like committing to a tool and being like, all right, well, what can I build with this?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then, I guess building off of that. So, once you start thinking up the space, maybe just like doing quick searches like that space, open source. And I think in terms of practical ways of going about it, so our teammate Cami had put out a video about how do I contribute to open source? So you can actually look that up too. It's a very step-by-step guide of if you find a repo, how to find a lot of projects actually. If they're larger maintained projects, they'll tag issues that they need help with as maybe beginner, or easy for beginner or boot camp. And then as someone who's new to the project, I can go in and say, take a look at it, read through it, and see if this is something that I'm interested in, and then probably I can engage with the team members if I have questions about how to work on this. But that video definitely is a very step-by-step guide about how to approach using GitHub, especially for someone who's using it for the first time and then interested in contributing. So I think going with Jesslyn's approach first and then working through that.
Great. Okay. So is your team growing? Is the team hiring at the moment? If people are interested in finding out about roles, what do they do?
I feel like Facebook is always growing. So like Facebook is always hiring all over the world.
But I mean, your team in particular. How big is the team actually? Start with that.
Yeah.
How big is the open source team?
The open source team. The open source team is, gosh, I don't actually have the exact number on top of my head, but it's about half developer advocates of people who think about like developer experiences and developer communities, and then half people who think about tooling and like just like maintaining like large, just kind of like tooling across the board for open source projects. And then obviously, I'm like, that's like the immediate like open source team, but there are a lot of people within Facebook who care a lot about different open source projects. And in my head, it's like, I think of them as part of the open source team as well.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say if anyone's interested, probably take a look at the Facebook careers page, and then do a search there for developer advocate. And so whatever job posting that we have, we'll post it out there immediately. So right now, I think we're probably looking to hire moving forward, but no current openings. But yeah, definitely keep an eye out there if anyone's interested.
I was actually talking to a colleague recently who works on a sister team, and he told me that he actually became a Facebook employee because he was involved in developer circles. So he was like very involved in like developer communities, and I guess someone within Facebook noticed and was like, "Hey, we should like bring this guy internally. He has like really great ideas about community. Is really good about like rallying people together," and that's how he ended up at Facebook. So that's one possible route.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I think some of our team members were folks who had contributed to open source projects, and they just gotten so much visibility, traction, so much cred.
It's always good to get involved with community, because it opens up opportunities, for people. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people, who have gone through that process. So I think we should definitely encourage people to get involved with developer communities, especially if they want the DA roles. And it's interesting, there are other roles that are like popping up. Like there's now a developer experience role or something like that. So roles which were not there in the past, right? Even developer advocates, we didn't have developer advocates I think a few years ago, or when I was starting. So so things are evolving a lot, which is very interesting. Okay, any other like maybe pointers for women out there as to actually one more question. So why is Facebook open source important to you both personally?
You want to start? I can start.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Sure. I talked a little bit about like the potential of Facebook. I'm like, Facebook's just like massive like platform and resources to democratize technology. One story. So I'm, like I said earlier, it's like I'm from Indonesia, and I think like up until several years ago, just like within the last decade, I never really thought of myself as someone who would learn how to code. But that ended up happening, and like one thing led to another, and I ended up at Facebook, and now I have this like it's just like I suddenly have like this platform to be able to do things like this and meet cool people and like help redistribute resources and opportunities. I think a lot about so my dad is from a town in Indonesia called Medan. And we had a developer from Medan who, through Facebook open source tools, managed to get like a better career as a software engineer and like apparently increase his salary like 10x, which is wild. Basically, he started as a graphic designer at a local printing shop, and then he ended up, I think, learning like React or React Native, like, which was an open source project. Like, you know, it's like he could just be like some guy, and he just like went ahead and learned this, and then he ended up being part of the developer circles effort in his community in Indonesia, and now he increased his salary, and that's just really wild. And I remember reading that story, and it was just really special to me, just like thinking a little bit about like my family and where I came from. It's just kind of like, wow, I want to create more stories like that, and I want to unlock more opportunities like that for people who are like me, or people who are just like not based in the United States.
So why is Facebook open source important to me? So personally, I think my journey has also been like a lot thanks to open source, even if I didn't know it. So my actual background was in biomedical engineering. And so then from there, I moved over into the medtech world. And then that was actually at the pivot when edtech education was becoming a thing. So nowadays, taking classes on Zoom seems very commonplace, but at the time it felt just very surreal. And the fact that people would put their knowledge online and share it with the world felt just like a miracle. And so from there, I went into that world and started being able to teach folks from around the world, and really just like really getting to see, like Jesslyn was saying, like how their lives were changing. I think one of my favorite stories was, so at the time I was teaching Android development online, and in order for students to graduate, we had to do one-on-one kind of graduation tests with them at the end. And so I was talking to this student from Nigeria, and then at the end, we finished the test, and I congratulated him that he'd passed. And then he like pulled out this bottle of champagne from under his desk, and was like, "I've been waiting for this. I'm so excited." And so it was just like it was very eye-opening and very exciting to see how we were connecting over being able to build on this platform and being able to build together, even though we were like millions of miles apart, and how excited they were for it. And then being able to go into the side where getting to work with the engineering teams of building out these products so that we can share it with the world has been one of those like connect the dots when you're looking back story. So very, very excited to be here.
Your story reminds me a lot of, I guess, what we were talking about 2 points ago about how like the world is changing and like literally anyone can put content online. I know that when you were asking, it was like, is a developer advocacy team hiring? It's kind of like, don't wait around for Facebook developer advocacy to have like open heads. Like literally, like with a smartphone, like go record some videos, put it on YouTube. That is free. That is a thing anyone can do. And there's so many people out there who do that. And I think it's so cool that, it's like you don't have to wait for anyone's permission to get started learning things, building things, and then sharing it on the internet for anyone around the world to benefit off.
Yeah, especially because of the year we've gone through, there are a lot more new creators nowadays, right? Which is great, because I think there are a lot of people who were like really shy before, but now people have been given the opportunity to just go out there and create and send their message to the world, basically. So it's really very interesting. So I don't know what our new normal will be, honestly, when we get out of this pandemic. I think it will be a different world. Okay. Any other pointers out there for people who are watching us? Obviously, this event is not just for women. We opened it up to everyone, basically, because there's no physical limitation for us to to accommodate anyone. So any tips for people out there that you can think of that you haven't mentioned with regards to like open source? Any other advice?
Be good to each other.
Oh.
Oh,
Like,
well, actually, that's a very good point, especially in
mhm,
the open source world, because you
yeah,
hear a lot of like comments sometimes from maintainers who say, "Oh my God, the like this PRs, they sound like rude or something." Or the comments are like, it's like some people expect their little issue to be prioritized and fixed and all that, when probably it's just their issue, not really you know millions of people complaining about it. But yeah, I know what you mean, especially to maintainers who are actually volunteers and you're spending a lot of like their time on top of jobs. So yeah, I think, yeah, be nice to each other would be
yeah,
very good.
yeah, that's a good
um
point.
It
Like
costs.
yeah.
the expect good intent, which is essentially what you're saying, right? Of being good to each other, and kind of to your point of what will the world look like once we come out of this. I think in the most hopeful sense that we'll take the best of what we've learned from it. So like you're saying, we've been able to these conferences that are generally in person. Now we have the opportunity to learn what it's like to open it to the world, and then be able to take that forward. And yeah, like when we're working virtually, sometimes there will be instances where we don't necessarily understand, or there might be some miscommunication, but always expect good intent, with what we're reading, or what the person across the web is trying to tell us. And I think that would definitely make things moving forward much smoother.
I feel like the big
Yeah.
takeaway here is like it costs $0 to contribute to open source. It costs nothing to put content, whether that's like blogs or videos, on the internet, and it also costs nothing to be nice on the internet. So
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, well, thanks, Jesslyn and Jessica, for joining us today. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing more about your work, in the future. And yeah, if you have that link, maybe just send it to us, and we'll share it to attendees as well, so that they can check out in all those good information that's available, that will hopefully help them out. Okay, well, I guess we're gonna wrap this up. And thank you again for joining us, everyone. And yeah, I'm glad that we had some time with Justin and Jessica here today. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.